Well, we have the Assyrians promising a rose garden to all the people of Israel. And, I got to turn it on. I think I got to turn it on. So do they buy it? Apparently not. They've been sold a bill of goods from other people before, and they're not going to fall into this trap too. Even from this other messenger with the purple thing on it in the candles. So Hezekiah is one of the good guys. If you read some of the Kings and Chronicles, you'll see there's good king, bad king, good king, bad king. Hezekiah was one of the good kings. Last week we had Micah, and Micah's a contemporary of Isaiah. And Micah said, you're going to get a king who will help you, who will rescue you. And this king is Hezekiah. He's walking with the Lord. He's almost next to David in terms of being faithful to God. And people, I think, know that. And I think that's why they're not buying this story from this messenger. How many times have people offered you something and it's still too good to be true, right? We see that all the time on infomercials or wherever we're at. I'll promise you a land of grain and wine and all these wonderful things, but yet the small print, like you said, is you're still going to be conquered people. You won't have all the freedoms you have now. You're going to be under my rule. And so who do you believe? Do you believe this bozo from, I shouldn't say that, it's going to be on YouTube now. Do you believe this guy, this messenger from the Assyrians, or do you believe the God that has been with the people throughout time? Who do you believe? And to their credit, the Israelites stick to their guns. Say, we're not going to buy that. It's like, when you tell your family member something, and you keep telling them something, and keep telling them something. It's not true in my case, but they don't believe you until someone from the outside says the same thing, and all of a sudden, oh, you know what I heard? This is true. So, well, I've been saying that for the past 5 years. Who do you believe? Who do you believe? Well, this God of Hezekiah, the God of Israel, has built up trust over the years. It's a very important thing. Hezekiah knows that God is with him. Hezekiah is faithful to the end. When he hears the story, he rips his clothes, he repents, he asks God for prayers, he prays to God, and God hears Hezekiah's prayers and delivers the people. And later on, we read the continuation of the story from the Sennacherib, this Assyrian king, as he gets killed by his own 2 sons by the sword. You live by the sword, you die by the sword, unfortunately. One of the arguments he makes is to say that, we've had other nations with other gods who were not able to deliver them from Assyria. We conquered all the people and all their gods. What makes your God any different? And the question I have is, even if the Israelites were going to be conquered by the Assyrians, was God still present with the people of Israel? Sometimes you wonder in the Old Testament and also perhaps now, the Crusades and other things where you had this God in front of you, the flag, and God is marching into battle with you. And if you've got God on your side, then you can conquer anybody and everything in its path. Well, it's not always true, because we know that even some of the good kings didn't win all their battles, and yet they were good, faithful people. And God was still with God's people. And how do we say that today? Is God still with us, even if we happen to not be in the best of light of things? If we lose our job, if we lose our contest, if we lose this or that and the other thing, if we're not always on top, does that mean God is not with us? There's several references in here that God will always deliver God's people and always will conquer. But it's not always the case. And so we have to look at deeply within ourselves and say, does that still abide with us? Is that still a God who we can plan on, live with, and believe in, even though we not get the results that we may want or not? God is still God's, and God's people are still God's people, no matter what the outcome of any battle, of any war. People who don't have much, conquered nations, God is still present in those places with abusive dictatorships, with oppressive regimes. God is still with God's people, working and acting in people's lives. God is not only known by doing battle or being the conquering God. You know, how are we known? How is our United States known? Are we known as a big military power? Are we known as a charitable nation that helps people? Are we a key integral part of the United Nations? Well, we're a lot of those things. I don't think there's any one identity that we can claim or that God has for us, because God acts in all different areas of our lives. We identify ourselves in many different ways. We're viewed by other countries in many different ways too than how we view ourselves. And that sometimes gives us a good perspective of what we're doing and who we are. It's always nice to get an outside perspective of who we are as people. Remember the mirror and the beta fish? People to hold up a mirror and say, you're on track. I see God living through you, or you're way off balance, or you're way off the mark. You need to kind of refocus your energy and refocus what you're up to. This also reminds me, this reading this morning, of when Jesus was baptized, what happened? Sent out into the wilderness. And who meets him there? Well, Satan meets him there. And Satan is like this messenger. He's going to offer him everything, if only he'll kneel and bow and worship Satan. If only the Israelites will worship and kneel and bow to the Assyrians. All these good things will be yours. And yet, Jesus refuses. He's got a higher level of understanding, a higher level of faith, something that Sennacherib doesn't have a clue about. He thinks that the God of Israel is strictly a God of war. He doesn't realize that the God of Israel is in people's hearts. The God of Abraham and Isaac is in our hearts. When I read, and I've read some modern-day atheists writing books, and they say, well, it says in the Bible this, this, and this, and look at the wars that Christians do. I say, well, that's on the surface. What are in the hearts of people? God affects us inside more than just words on a page. Jesus is the embodiment of this God who doesn't listen to this surface stuff from Satan, all these wonderful promises that are false. Instead, he doesn't become a conquering warrior. He becomes a humble servant. He becomes the one who invites, the one who heals, the one who loves people no matter who they are, whether they're Israelites or they're outside of the circle of the community of the Israelites. This is the way of God. This is what we have to build our faith upon, this God who is much more than just a conquering God or a conquering king. Someone who gently tugs at our hearts, and sometimes we hurt. Sometimes we feel joy, and sometimes we feel all those things that humans feel, but we know that God is working inside of us. Sometimes we have those outside that God brings into our lives to give us this peace, this understanding that God is much more than our meager selves or our words on a page or simple history, but working on our hearts daily on a much deeper level, sometimes frustratingly so that we can't even express what it means or why we believe what we do, or why we are Christians, because it's so deep in our hearts. This is the God we believe in. We don't believe in all the other stuff that's floating around that kind of points us away from this gentle, loving, inclusive, forgiving, merciful God. And this is the God that Hezekiah has been in love with, for lack of a better word, his whole life, true to his whole life, trying to guide his people in that process, in those steps, as Jesus gently guided his disciples day by day, simple things, small numbers of people affected in small different ways, but very powerful in the faith journey of the Christian faith of our lives, of Christian people. Who do you believe? Who do you believe? It's God who is the one that delivers. It's God who saves us, sometimes from ourselves, sometimes from the influence of others. But it is God who is steadfast and true in our lives, giving us a foundation that's more than words on a page, that's more than just a military might, that's more than just simply a God on paper, but something real and tangible and substantive. The God of Hezekiah was much more than the king of Assyria could ever imagine, because he didn't have that sense in himself. The God of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Hezekiah, David, and Jesus Christ is ever present and continues to live through us, in us, guiding us, and giving us a sense that there's more to our lives than just simple out there stuff. Amen.